So, I'm going to go walk you through how to make Mom's apple pie because I started reading through her directions and I realized I knew what the directions would tell me to do, but I don't know if you sat with her enough times to know what to do. So we're doing this. I'm starting here with basically the prep work. So my apples have been sliced and peeled and sliced, and mixed with the cup and a quarter of white sugar and a quarter cup of flour. Both of those ingredients are very important for your filling for an apple pie because the sugar juices the apples and the flour helps it congeal so that you have that nice, wonderful, flavorful center of a pie and not pie soup. The recipe calls for 7 medium Granny Smith apples. They don't have to be the prettiest, you're taking the peels off. If they're mushy, cut the mushy parts out. You should end up with about 7 cups of apples once you've sliced and peeled and sliced them. If it's a little closer to 8, if it's a little over 6, you're in the right zone. Then we have flour. It is 2 heaping cups of flour and a tablespoon of salt. Before you start anything, you don't want to just leave the salt on top. Go ahead and mix it together because the nature of this recipe means if the salt isn't distributed through the flour, when you add your fats, your shortening and your butter, it's going to end up in clumps and you're going to have random bites of salt in your pie crust. The last set of ingredients that we prepped were the 2/3 cup of Crisco and 2 tablespoons of butter softened. The butter needs to be softened. Do not melt it. It's very important in this recipe that your fats are still in their solid state so that you can properly emulsify them in the flour. If they are liquid, they're not going to behave the way they're supposed to when you bake. You're not going to get a fluffy, crispy crust. You're going to get something a bit more like a cracker. Not pie crust cracker, that's different. All right, so we're gonna start. We have our dry goods here. We're gonna go ahead and add our fats. I am using a fork. I got you a pastry cutter, which is easier. You do not mix your fats into your flour, you're cutting them. So you're gonna basically take whatever you're using, the slotting is very important, and cut in the cut into the flour with the fat. So you're dragging the fat through the flour so that you don't end up with as much a mixture as a change of state. I wish I understood the chemistry a bit better to be able to explain it. I just know that if you end up with it gummy, it's not going to do the thing correctly. And in a minute, we are going to be adding cold water. It is very important to use cold water because if you use room temperature to warm water, you're going to melt your fats. And you're going to end up at the same place you would have been if you had melted your butter to begin with, and you're going to end up with a very dense cracker instead of a flaky crust. So it's very much how you're getting your gluten and your fats mixed together and combined so that you can make your dough. And so you're gonna keep on doing this, and right now we still have these larger clumps, like here. We're trying to get more consistently this pebbly texture through the entire thing before we add our water, because once we add our water, that's when we need to start kneading. And where most people mess up their pie dough is they over knead it. When you over knead gluten, you end up with a very tough texture. And once again, it doesn't properly flake and end up with that great classical pie texture. And I'm doing this with a fork. You should have a pastry cutter, but honestly, anything with multiple that you can drag your fat through your flour and kind of smush it. Almost like you're playing Play-Doh again. All right.
So with the fork, we can see what you're doing. With his pastry cutter, what is he doing? It's like
a pastry cutter is holding and almost the same action. It's down and pull. Down and pull.
Okay.
The same way I'm taking the fork down and I'm pulling across.
Okay. Because I would naturally see that thing and want to rock it, but it's more of a
yeah. Yeah. Now you can go back and forth. That's whenever you're clearing your, so the back and forth movement with a pastry cutter is more to clear your wires than it is to actually do any of the mixing. All right, so this is actually good. So we are in the right consistency. This nice crumbly consistency is what we're wanting. And now it's time to add water. Now, it can just be tap cold or out of your refrigerator door. I put it in the fridge so I didn't have to measure it in front of the camera. Tap cold is fine. You just don't want it lukewarm or hot. Because if it's lukewarm or hot, you'll melt your fat, and we don't want that. So I'm just gonna...
Vigorous stirring right here.
Yep. Okay, now we're getting into the part where people go awry. So we're going to knead it, because right now it's very sticky. We don't want it super sticky. So kneading is very important for texture. It's also the nature of flouring your hands. We'll add a little bit more flour to the mix.
And it's not a concern that you got more flour in the mixture just now?
Nope. Easy as pie is very much a misnomer about the nature of pie. We assume that it means pie is easy to make. In reality, it's a notation, and this is still too sticky, so I'm adding more flour to clarify what I'm doing right here. Because we're looking for a texture. We're just gonna drop that there. There we go, that's better. So, easy as pie denotes the expertise of the craftsperson, not the ease of the task. So sometimes you're gonna mess up your measurements, and if you're in too much fat, not enough flour, too much water, not enough flour, you add flour to decrease how sticky it is. So we have a nice, come in.
And it like instantly turned from that crumble to this like really smooth texture too.
And see how it's not sticking to my hands? That's a good dough. So that is what a knead look. It shouldn't be very many. You just want to knead it until you can get a nice moldable dough. We're going to divide it into 2 pieces. This recipe makes a top and a bottom, or 2 bottoms.
Can I clarify what exactly you mean by moldable?
Yes, so moldable, so when it was crumbly, I could pick it up and I could, like wet sand, make that little shape in your hand, but mostly it falls apart.
Yeah.
This, it's not gonna fall apart. I don't wanna overhandle it, because once again, we'll get into too tough category. All right, so you divide it into 2, and then it is time to roll it out. I have given you a pie sheet, which is amazing. My ass has wax paper. If you don't have your sheet, if it's not clean or you don't like it, wax paper is my preference over parchment paper because it is more durable. Parchment paper has a tendency to tear on you. And you definitely want to do this on wax paper. There are people who do it straight on their slabs, and that works. But I like being able to move the crust around without having to worry about it sticking. So, again, a little extra flour so that we're not sticking. A little extra flour. So, this is a art form that masquerades as chemistry. Rolling pin, and we do not want to smush down. If I go and I make 2 halves by pressing down, bad crust. So we are going to start with even pressure and slowly work it down. We're going to want to work in all different directions. You want to avoid doing that. See how the dough is making a wave? A little one like this is fine. Big one, not good. You want to do it with even, consistent movements, because at the same time you're wanting to get it thin, but you're not wanting to overwork your dough. Overworked gluten is tough and flavorless.
And again, we're going for flaky.
We're going for flaky. We're going for warm Christmas memories, not tortilla chips that are too thick. All right, and that's fine. So occasionally that will happen where your stuff has gotten too sticky again, and it'll cling to your rolling pin and roll up. Just back it out, put it back down.
Looked like little tear.
Yeah, flour, and then just, now what I recommend is whichever direction your tear is running, turn your dough, roll across it. Wonderful demonstration. Thank you so much for cooperating, Pie Crust. Such a helpful little helper. All right, and that speaks to I need to flour my dough again. And as long as you're not just drowning your dough, you will not overflour it. It's very much a add a little bit at a time until you're good. Now you're gonna eat that.
Ooh, yay.
Naughty pieces get eaten. Okay. And it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Pie is not going to be perfect your first time. It is a journey of trial and error and getting patient with yourself and the pie. Okay, so this is about the thickness of a good crust. Honestly, it's probably still a little too thick.
Really? It's almost translucent over here.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It looks like
Is that a
translucent.
shadow?
So if you look really closely, you can see where the different densities of shortening is mixed in with the flour.
Mm-hmm.
So it's creating the effect of looking translucent, but not actually being translucent. And I just know that because of scenic art. We used a similar trick to create full marble. But, so there we go. That's about right.
So what kind of size are you going for? Is that just experience, or?
So that is largely experience. I know that roughly this size and this thickness will fit this pie dish.
Okay.
It's gonna be a little big, it's gonna be a little small.
His mat has like those circles on it though, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Your mat will be a helpful guide, but unfortunately I don't have any strong tips aside from half of the dough you just mixed in the recipe will make the bottom of the pie. And then you just have to kind of learn how big that needs to be and how thick that needs to be with trial and error and experience, which is part of the reason why I'm doing this video, is because all I can do is kind of show you. I can't explain aside from, you do it until it looks right. And this is how it looks.
And I'm asking dumb questions.
And she's asking the dumb questions that need to be asked because I bugged Mom with these questions.
Real fast, what did you just do?
Oh, so we laid out and rolled out on the wax paper or your mat. This is why you want the mat, because with the mat underneath it, you pick up the whole thing and you fold your crust over your pie dish and then gently peel the wax paper away. And then if you did it right, ta-da, it is in your pie dish. And this is where you just kind of maneuver your crust into the pie dish and reduces any chances of tears or rips. And a rip and a tear is not the end of the pie. It's not like, oh, if you rip it, it is done forever. You're a shame upon your mother and your father, and your heritage shall never know prosperity again. No, you rip off a piece and you patch it. It's just more work. You're just trying to minimize the amount of work you need to do. I need butter knife.
So you weren't just pushing it down.
Yes.
You weren't just pushing it down into it. You were like lifting to like get it to fold into it.
Yeah. So you want to walk your sides down. And if you end up with something where it's not quite covering the crust, we're just going to come over here, take the excess, and patch. Make a happy little patch. So you take a knife and cut around the edge.
And you are having to like hold down those creases and things to get those edges.
A little bit.
So you want to get a good angle for the knife. So it's like along the edge, not like...
You use the edge of the pie plate as your guide. We'll get another pie in a minute. Okay.
Oh, good.
So that is essentially your bottom crust. We're just gonna do a little quick patch. All right, before we move on, can I get a fork, please? Yes.
Do you want the same fork you were using earlier?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Out of your way.
So, we do not want to use this. We are saving this for pie crust crackers because in order to roll out the next one, this dough will get overworked. It'll be too tough. Better to save it for pie crust crackers in a minute. Before we add apples, we come in with a fork. And not as aggressively as that. To be truthful, I think Mom explained to me why we do this at one point. I don't remember. I just know that it has a tendency to stay flat on the bottom of the pan and evenly bake if you properly puncture the bottoms. All right, let's do the other pie tin. Go through rolling it out again. Yeah, we're good. It's not actually important which side you use. The side that you used previously will be less likely to stick, but you still flour it because you want it to stick enough to transfer, but you don't want to be fighting your dough. Again, we're just gonna walk it like it's a retirement dog. Don't ever rush yourself. Be patient when making pies. Pies are definitely one of the home activities that was very meditative for Mom, and now it's very meditative and calming for me. I'm not as calm as I normally am when I'm doing this because I have an audience.
It's me.
And you. Because I know you, Josh. I know you're judging. Right. We're sticking. We're going to sprinkle and rub. If you do not have a rolling pin for some reason, any cylindrical object with a decent diameter can work. I have used drinking glasses. I have used just bars that were properly cleaned. You do want something that has 1.5 inches, 2 inches or more. I will say the thicker it is, the more cumbersome it is, but it will work.
And round, not an octagon.
Yes.
As in a pint glass, not a Joe's cup.
Yes. Pint glass, not a Joe's cup. You can try. You can try and use a Joe's cup. I will be thoroughly entertained by that exercise in futility. But I'm not a sadist, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. And just, if you find yourself accidentally ending up with a lopsided, the reason I'm rotating it is because we want to go around. And if we just do one direction the entire time, we're going to end up with a oblong. And most pie plates are not oblong. If you have an oblong pie plate, by all means, knock yourself out. But you do want to rotate it so that you can get as round as possible, because it just reduces the amount of work you have to do down the line.
The other thing I'm noticing you're doing this time is as you get those tears, you're going with the tear and sort of backing off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's
something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it is something that you can do. You're gonna get tears. You're gonna end up having to patch your own dough. Do not lose your temper and crumple this all up and start over. That is going to give you a tough crust. You're just gonna have to live with the mistakes and work them back out. And know that it's okay. And know that most people don't bother to take the time to do their own pie, much less pie crust, from scratch. And most people are just going to be grateful for the effort and energy that you put into something that is uniquely made by you. And if they're not the kind of people that'll appreciate that, fuck them.
And also, don't make them a pie.
Yeah. You don't need that negativity in your life. Unless, of course, making the pie itself is the point.
Okay.
Sometimes I just give people pies because I need to make a pie and I don't need to eat a whole pie. All right.
Again, that's why I'm here.
You don't like baked fruit. All right, again. So we're taking our mat that we rolled out our pie crust, and we're just going to lift it and lay it down, doing our best to center. If you failed the first time, if you're careful, you can gently walk it back, but you're more likely to get a tear. Once again, tear, not the end of the world. Just gonna put it back down. Gently peel off our wax paper. There's our tear. There's the shame upon my ancestors. Mom is rolling over in her grave. Oh wait, no she's not. She showed me how to do this. We're just gonna pat it down and fix that seam. And we're gonna carefully work our dough into the corners. And we're just lifting to reduce the tension and pressing into the corners. Okay, there we are. Again, use a knife. Coming to the edge of the pan, we use the pan to cut off all the excess. It doesn't need to be pretty. It'll get prettier the more you do it. And we don't have to do any patching this time around, so I'm not gonna save any of it. Actually, no, we're gonna fix that little rip and fix that little rip. We're just gonna toss that in the side. We're gonna eat it while this is baking. And then whatever's left, it's gonna go in the oven for pie crust crackers. Right. And more gently this time. Poke, poke, poke. And honestly, I probably am still getting my crusts a little too thick. That feels a little too thick still. All right, a quick notation. I am actually making 2 pies tonight for the wonderful cameraman who likes pumpkin pie. A pumpkin pie is a topless pie. Yes, gentlemen, control yourself. So whenever you're doing pies, there are topless pies and there are topped pies. Apple pie, obviously topped pie. Whenever we add the fruit, we're gonna put a top over it, we're gonna pinch the crust seal, we're gonna throw in the oven, we're gonna bake it for an hour. That's that. Topless pies. Generally, they're going to be one of 2 flavors. It's either gonna be a dry or it's gonna be wet. If it is a dry going in, not when it comes out, when it's going in, you want to leave the pie crust raw. Because if it's dry, it's gonna juice the baking process and it's going to bake the crust at the same time that the fruit or whatever is in it is juicing. If it is a wet pie, if it is a custard, if it is if you put it in and bake it and it gets solid, that's a wet pie. You're gonna wanna pre-bake the crust. Because if it is wet, when it goes into the oven process, your crust is not going to bake all the way through and it's gonna end up being very soggy. So we're gonna go ahead and take this pie, we're gonna put it in the oven. Alexa set a time for 15 minutes. It bakes at a temperature of 375 and it's 15 to 30 minutes. I always recommend start with 15 minutes and do 5-minute intervals until it is golden brown. Did you set the timer? Okay, so we're gonna set this aside because now we need to do the other half of the pie. So we're gonna start with our dry ingredients. Someone walked off with my flour.
A little bit.
2 heaping cups of flour. To clarify what a recipe means when it says heaping, in case you have forgotten, is most recipes when they ask for a cup of flour, a professional baker will illustrate to you how you get a cup of flour is by flattening the top. To get a heaping cup of flour, you skip that and that is your heaping cup of flour. Once again, this is an art form masquerading as chemistry. Single teaspoon, single tablespoon of salt. I always like to sprinkle it out because, like I said, when you add the fat, it's more likely to capture the salt if it's together. And you're gonna end up with random bites of salt in your pie crust. So everything that you can do to go ahead and pre-disperse that salt through your flour before you add your fat makes your life easier. Shortening is what you are awesome. Shortening. You want to kind of treat it a little less like heaping, but don't drive yourself crazy because you're not going to get it all out of the cup. Okay. So 2/3 of shortening. And then 2 tablespoons of butter on the cutting board if you don't mind. All right, if you did not salt your butter out to soften and it's still a little too firm, this one's good. What you can do instead of melting it, we're just gonna do this on the wrapper, is go ahead and pre-cut it into smaller tips. We're using thermodynamics to our advantage to get the kind of resistance that we want when we're cutting the fat into our flour. And then again, we're just gonna drag our pastry cutter, whatever we're using. So we're pulling the fat through the flour. So most recipes call for some kind of binder. Most baking recipes will call for a source of gluten or a starch, in the case of people who have gluten allergies, but most of it is gluten. A fat, butter, usually butter, cream, shortening obviously, and then a binder, which is usually eggs. Sometimes it's something like bananas. Any of the vegan protein substitutes will usually be utilized in some recipe somewhere as the binding agent in a baked good. This recipe does not have a binder. It is purely the gluten and fat, which is why it's so important that you do not melt your fat, because when it's congealed, it is operating as your binder. When it melts, it ceases being your binder. So we only want it to bake into your gluten to make your crust. We don't want it to function purely as a fat. That's why this recipe is both incredibly easy and incredibly sensitive. All right. So I'm being a little less thorough this time just because I'm wanting to move faster and I'm wanting to show you a little bit more of the gray area you can operate in. This crumbly, perfectly fine. Yeah, that's good recipe. That's good. All right, where's my 2/3 cup?
Sorry. Okay.
Awesome. We're just gonna get our tap gold. 1. And ignore that. 2/3. Also notice how I tried to spread out the liquid. I didn't just dump it in the center. Once again, we want to do everything to get as pre-mixed as possible, because the least amount of work we give the dough, the less likely we're gonna end up with a tough crust. And a tough crust will sometimes still be a tasty crust. It's just the difference between your learning journey and impressing future in-laws or bosses. Or people you wanna impress. Who do people impress?
Girlfriends.
Right. Oh, and to clarify kneading motions, what I'm doing is I'm coming in, scooping, turning over, and pressing. Scoop and press. Scoop, fold, and press.
Press more with the heel than
Yeah.
the palm.
You're working the dough with your heel, not your fingers. You'll wear yourself out doing that. That's less of a gonna affect the taste and more of a your hand will thank you later. Unless, you never do more than 1 or 2 pies in a go. Because if you recall, Mom did like 6 to 8 every year. All right, once again. Wax paper down. Flour spread. This is a messy process. We have crust 1. And we're just gonna, you can see where I've rushed a little bit. You see how it's kind of crackly?
Crumbly.
That is okay. That is the sign that I've rushed the mixing process. But we can still take it nice and slow and kind of knead the cracks and crumbles away. Easiest pie is about your proficiency, not the ease of the task. Which means at one point, the pie was not easy. And most of the time, pie is not easy for anyone else.
Oh, see, I'm starting to recognize when it needs more flour.
Yeah. There we go.
And we know if I'm getting it all good at baking, then we've done a good job.
Yes, if Nicole has picked it up, we have done a good video. All right. And I am going to write all of this down and include this in your gift package. I just wanted to be able to demonstrate the techniques to you. Because so much of what I know about how to make these pies comes from Thanksgiving and Christmas, after Thanksgiving and Christmas, sitting with Mom and watching her do this and asking her questions and being the pain in the ass that I was. And then making some really god-awful pies that you never got to witness. You be nice. All right. So you see how that edge is a little bit more uneven because I've rushed the process this time around? That doesn't mean bad pie. That just means I rushed the process and I need to be careful when I'm transferring it because it's going to be more likely to rip. But as long as there's no rips, as long as we press any seams and merge them together, we should still have a perfectly serviceable pie. There is a reason the secret to pie is love, because God, you needed to love people to make more than 2 of these. And we're good. All right, this is the top for the apple pie, so we're gonna slide this to the side. We're gonna bring our apple pie base back. And you'll have seen that the pie has shrunk and the apples have shrunk and juiced a little bit. We like that, that's good. So, in this recipe again, the sugar is the juicer. It's what's gonna draw out all the juice in the fruit and make that very tart apple nice and sweet. And the flour is what's going to enable that juice to firm up into a nice, thick sauce versus this being a slightly runny pie. It's also why the setup time after you pull it out of the oven is so important, because that will be literally molten sugar when it comes out of the oven. Which I'm pretty sure you remember that particular burn in your mouth. Because we rushed that a couple times as kids. All right, and again, we're gonna put our hand under. We're gonna kind of eyeball it, and then we're just gonna go over on top. Oh wait, butter. We forgot something.
See the hands?
Oh, we're good.
Okay.
Before you seal your pie, you want to do 2 to 3 pats. And I say pats because that's what they are. They're not quite a teaspoon, they're not quite a tablespoon. They're a slice of butter that you put on top of the apples before you seal it up.
Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
I believe it's a part of the juicing process and a part of the butter melts mixed with the flour that's already immersed through the rest of the apples and adds to its ability to draw together and thicken up into a proper sauce and not a drizzle. We're gonna lock that back. We're gonna peel it off. Oh. And a shame upon my mother's house, we have an imperfect crust. That's okay. I'm just gonna come in here. I'm just gonna work it together. Not a problem. Same deal over here. Just gonna kind of gently press it in. Alrighty. When you do a topped pie like this, and you have a top and a bottom crust, you need to pinch the crusts together. And I'm sure that there's some of this stuff that you remember. There's some of this stuff that Mom probably showed you. I'm just going over all of it because I had to stumble myself through personal refreshers based off of memories. All right, so how we pinch crust together. Take a hand and you close these 3 fingers together. So we're gonna take them, we're gonna and pinch, and pinch, and pinch. And this is not a pretty crust. I don't like this pie pan, but it's the pie pan I have. So we live with the imperfections. But making sure to grab the bottom crust and press it into the top crust so that we're sealed. I'm also gonna use it to close our little cracks here and there. And periodically you're gonna accidentally press too far down and make an opening. That's fine. Pie's gonna juice and some of the juice is gonna overflow, and that's just gonna give a place to overflow, hopefully into the pie instead of off the pie. That is the tip that I have for you, is whenever you bake pies, especially really juicy like apple pies, have a sacrificial baking sheet in the bottom shelf so that you don't have to clean up syrup. All right, and there is our less than perfect Mom's apple pie. But practice makes perfect in all things. And we're gonna do 3 slices to let loose of the steam. And then also,
Sugar.
pinch of sugar, lightly dusting on the top.
That was a big pinch.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And similarly, a dusting of cinnamon. And now she goes in the oven at 375 for 45 minutes. So after baking for 45 minutes, we covered it with tin foil. And then I took the tin foil off because it wasn't brown enough. And baked it for an additional 15 minutes. time to bring it out and let it rest. Mom liked to let it rest for at least an hour before serving because once again, molten sugar. And there we have a pie.